Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. And your host is Michael Clogs. Infrastructure, transit, safe drug use, decriminalization. All these should be part of the platform that every party is running on. Every party should have a plan to help answer the questions of how they will handle these things, how they will move forward in communities to protect people, to help people. So we're going to hear from Aaron O'Toole. He's going to talk about infrastructure and building cities so that they have the proper transit systems so that people can get to work, get to entertainment, and move forward with their lives in a safe and enjoyable manner. We're going to hear from Anna Mae Paul talking about safe injection sites and decriminalization of drug use. She will say that the drug users are not the criminals, and they shouldn't be termed as offenders, but they should be termed as users, those who need help with mental health issues and traumas. We will also hear that the liberals are releasing their platform, and we'll hear what that platform looks like and why they are proud to run on that platform. But most of all, as voters, what we're looking for is for our government and elected officials to be open and honest with us about what they can do to ease the issues at hand. So let's listen to what Justin Trudeau, Anna Mae Paul, and Aaron O'Toole have to say. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's press conference with the leader of the Green and Parenting Candidate, Anna Mae Paul.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. Thank you for being with us. Merci d'être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Today I am on the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. Je suis sur les territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat. More specifically, I'm here in the village. Our campaign office is just around the corner. I'm here in Barbara Hall Park, just beside the 519, which is one of the iconic community centers in this area. And I am here today pleading for the lives of people in our community and in communities like this and many other kinds of communities all across Canada. The cameras may not see it from their angle, but usually when you look around in the park between cleanings, you'll see the ground glistening. And the ground is glistening not because of some trick of the eye, but it's glistening because of the broken vials and the broken pipes that you often see in the park. The vials and the pipes that make this the most cleaned park in all of Toronto. And so in the heart of this community, this wonderful, generous, civic-minded community, people are suffering and people are dying because of what the federal government has not done to date in order to address the drug poisoning epidemic that has consumed our country. Even as we talk about the climate emergency and even as we tackle the health emergency that is the pandemic, we cannot forget this emergency that has taken tens of thousands of lives over the past year. Here in Toronto alone, there were 521 drug poisoning deaths, or sometimes we say opioid-related deaths. This is a 78% increase from 2019 and over 200% increase from 2015. So this is a problem that has gotten worse and worse and worse year on year, and the pandemic lit a match that is causing a raging fire of epidemic within this community and others. In the month of May alone in Toronto, in the course of just a few days, there were 13 drug poisoning deaths. And we now average approximately 17 opioid related deaths or drug poisoning deaths per day in Canada. And so it is time for us to acknowledge that what we are doing is not working, that the pandemic has made it worse, and that if we want to save lives that can be saved, then we need to take action now. There is a growing chorus around taking action. And before I mention more of that, let's just say why we talk about drug poisoning. Drug poisoning is the term that we use because we know that the supply is contaminated. And so people who are using are not overdosing so much as they are being poisoned to death by the supply that's available, which has gotten worse during the pandemic because of supply issues, and people don't have the same access to safe injection sites. And so we're seeing the results of that. Alors, nous sommes dans une autre pandémie, nous sommes dans une épidémie, c'est l'épidémie d'empoisonnement qui est liée à la contamination de notre approvisionnement de drogue. Ici à Toronto, on a eu plus de 500 fatalités en 2020 associées à l'empoisonnement. On sait que la pandémie a créé une situation énormément sévère. L'approvisionnement n'est pas sécuritaire. Les gens n'ont pas le même accès à les sites d'injection et on voit les résultats. Ce qu'on fait ne fonctionne pas. Il faut le reconnaître et il faut agir. And so what do? We know what we need to do. There is a consensus about what we need to do. The healthcare experts, those who work with drug users, the families who have lost their loved ones to this scourge, they have all said very clearly to the federal government and to every party what we must do. First, we decriminalize. Criminalization of a health issue turns it into a criminal issue. And this is a health issue, not a criminal issue. Criminalization creates stigma. It prevents people from getting the help that they need, from asking for the help that they need, from acknowledging that they need help. So we must decriminalize. We must never refer to drug users again as offenders, as they continue to be referred to by the Liberal Party and the Liberal government. These are not offenders. They are users. They are members of our communities, and they need help. Secondly, we create a national safe supply of drugs of choice. National safe supply, because we know that people are being poisoned to death. That even if we decriminalize simple possession, if we do not ensure that the drugs that are consumed are safe, then we will continue to see members of our community dying of poisoning. And drugs of choice, because we know that users want access to their drugs of choice, and that the alternatives that are provided through some supply programs simply are not going to appeal to drug users. So it must be drugs of choice. And once we have decriminalized simple possession and created that national safe supply, it must go hand in hand with wraparound services. Safe supply, safe injection sites, access to mental health services, access to community supportive housing, access to drug treatment. All of these things must go hand in hand. All of these things have been underinvested in. All of these things need to be part of the solution. Alors, il faut décriminaliser parce que c'est une question de santé et pas une question criminelle. Il faut éliminer le stigma. Il faut assurer que les gens ont accès à leur drogue de choix et que c'est un approvisionnement sécuritaire. Parce que sinon, les gens vont continuer à tourner vers les rues, continuer à tourner vers un approvisionnement qui n'est pas sécure. Ils vont continuer à s'empoisonner. Et puis, on doit ajouter l'accès à un logement avec accès à des services de santé mentale, accès à des services de conseillage aussi. On doit assurer qu'on a tous les soutiens pour les utilisateurs parce qu'on sait que c'est comme ça qu'on va vraiment assurer que les gens ont des choix. And then education. It's important to educate the people of Canada about the need for the first few measures that I mentioned. That being said, this is one of those areas where the people of Canada are far ahead of the policymakers. There is no community that has been untouched by this epidemic. No community. It is why we have seen coroners across the country, big city mayors across the country, chiefs of police across the country, etc., calling for decriminalization, precisely because we understand what it seems like many of the parties and policymakers don't, which is that we need change in order to save lives, and we have all the tools that we need. And so let this be the moment that we make that change. The Green Party of Canada called for these changes to be made in the last Parliament. Had we been returning to Parliament in September, as opposed to being thrown into this unnecessary and selfish election, then we could have been getting people in Canada the help they need, because we can expect 17 more people in Canada to die today, unnecessarily, because of the action that we haven't taken. Alors, c'est le moment d'agir. Le Parti vert, ça fait des années qu'on fait l'appel pour la décriminalisation et un approvisionnement sûr et sécuritaire. C'est le moment de le faire. We have all that we need. What we need now is political will that will save lives. We can start today. We should do it today. And the Green Party of Canada, as always, is ready to work with all parties on this urgent issue, this public health emergency, one that should be declared a national health emergency. We hope that this community and the people who live in this community can count on the support of all political parties to get the help that members of this community need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renee and Paul. We will now move on to questions from the ground. I have James Murray from CBC.
Good afternoon. Do you mean legalization of all drugs, including things like fentanyl, carfentanil, where a tiny speck that would fit on the end of my baby finger could kill you? Do you mean legalization of all of it?
So what we're calling for is the decriminalization of simple possession of all illicit drugs.
So legalization.
We're calling for the decriminalization of simple possession of all illicit drugs. That's not the same thing as legalization, but what we're asking for is for the elimination of the legal penalties that are attached to it. This is a public health issue. It's not a criminal issue. We've seen that that approach does not work. We've seen that it pushes people into the shadows. We need them to come out of the shadows, and then we need to make sure that we get them the help that they need when they're ready to ask for it. And in the meantime, that they have a safe supply. No one's going to use a drug that's laced with fentanyl. And we know that the street supply is completely laced with fentanyl. If they have an alternative of the same drug that they can be guaranteed is safe and secure.
And do you think it is the federal government's job to make sure all, even recreational drugs, are safe, to monitor the supply?
I believe that we have seen that fentanyl has creeped into the drug supply, period, full stop. I don't see any indication, neither do the public health experts or our coroners or the province of British Columbia, who was already asked for this exemption under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. There's no reason to believe that fentanyl is going to be exiting our supply anytime soon. It's showing up in very unexpected places. And so, yes, I believe that it is the role of the government, given what we know about what works, to ensure that there is a safe supply, an uncontaminated supply of drugs of choice for users.
Et votre réponse en français pour Radio-Canada, s'il vous
Oui,
plaît.
oui, absolument. Alors d'abord, c'est très important qu'on approche à cet enjeu comme un enjeu de santé publique et pas d'une question criminelle. On parle de la décriminalisation, c'est différent que la légalisation. Ça veut dire que la possession simple pour l'utilisation personnelle devrait être sans des pénalités criminelles. On met avec ça parce qu'on doit avoir les deux choses. On doit avoir aussi un approvisionnement sécuritaire. Parce qu'on sait que le fentanyl a entré dans dans tous les réseaux, dans tous les différents types de drogues. Il n'y a pas de raison de croire que ça va sortir dans l'avenir proche. Alors, on doit assurer que si les gens consomment des drogues, qu'ils ont accès à un approvisionnement sûr, c'est comme ça que nous allons sauver les vies.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. That concludes questions from the ground. Over to you, Rosie, in the digital Zoom room.
Okay, yes, we have Alison Jones from Canadian Press who'd like to ask you a question, Ms. Paul. Alison, go ahead, please.
Thanks so much. Hi, Ms. Paul.
Hello.
The Canadian Press is hearing that the Green Party won't have a full slate of candidates to run in the election. Why is that the case, and exactly how many do you expect to have on the ballot on election day?
Thanks for the question. I believe the numbers are still being calculated, so I can't give you an accurate total at this moment. I know that there's certain procedures with Elections Canada that are still underway. We expect that we are going to fall short of a full slate of candidates. By how much, we're still determining. There's no question that for a smaller party like ours, when you have an election under these circumstances, that it's more challenging. We had enough candidates step forward for a full slate, and then we ran into challenges in terms of collecting signatures in all of the ridings, particularly remote ridings or ridings where we're dependent upon seniors who volunteer with us, who are very nervous in provinces like Alberta and out west where COVID numbers are spiking. And then part of it, it's important also to acknowledge is that, I mean, certainly it's no secret that we've had our own distractions internally, which certainly made it more difficult for us to get to that full slate. And I want to acknowledge that as well. But those things combined, and so we think that we will have approaching a full slate, but not a completely full slate of candidates. We're very grateful to all of those who stepped forward to run. I'm very excited to be supporting them all, and I thank them for putting their names forward.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Alison, please?
I do. Thanks so much. Can you elaborate at all on how the party's internal troubles led to this situation?
Well, anything that isn't focused on in an election year on election readiness has the potential. It isn't necessarily, but has the potential to be a distraction or to be a resource draw from that work. And so certainly the energy that was placed in areas that weren't related to election preparedness certainly drew some of our time away from that. And so, again, it's important to say that I try to be as straightforward about these things as possible. It's not the only consideration, as I said. We are a significantly smaller party than the others, and of course, the entire way that this election cycle has been designed to favor first and foremost the incumbent party, but then also to favor larger parties. We know that our system is deliberately difficult for smaller parties to establish themselves. So for us, those factors, whether it's having volunteers in those remote locations, their concerns about being out in the community during COVID, the distractions that, again, not distractions, preoccupations that many were facing at this moment out in places where there are droughts or forest fires or all the things that we know that are happening right now, meant that for us we had more of a struggle this time. But we're excited about the slate we have. We think that it's going to be a good final number. And perhaps I'll underline now, and hopefully I'll have more information soon about it. We worked very hard through our Time to Run campaign to ensure that this was a very diverse slate of candidates. That's something that's been very important for me. We also took a little more time getting off the ground with our nominations in order to make sure that we were more diverse and inclusive. And so I'm confident that that will have yielded results, and I'm confident that we will have a diverse slate of candidates when we get to announce the full slate.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Thank you, Alison. Are there any other questions on Zoom? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Si vous voulez utiliser la fonction de lever la main pour demander une question, if you could just use the raised hand feature if there are any more questions.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
As we chart our path to recovery, we need a surefire way to get the economy moving again, to create jobs, to help communities across Canada recover. That starts with investing in infrastructure and actually getting projects done. We need more transit, better roads, more rail, more broadband networks across this country. Justin Trudeau loves making promises. He's had years of announcing and re-announcing the money he planned to spend. But 6 years later, he has little to show for it. Il faut plus de transport en commun, plus de transport ferroviaire, des meilleures routes et une connexion Internet haute vitesse partout au pays. Justin Trudeau aime faire des promesses. Il a passé des années à annoncer et à réannoncer les sommes d'argent qu'il prévoit dépenser. Mais 6 ans plus tard, on se demande où sont les résultats. In fact, both the Auditor General and the Parliamentary Budget Officer found that the Liberals failed to get billions of dollars out the door for projects. And it took them months, and in some cases calling an election, to actually commit to nationally significant projects, like Ontario's transit plan for the Greater Toronto Area, Vancouver's SkyTrain extension to Langley, and Calgary's Green Line. A Conservative government will get shovels in the ground on these projects. Through Canada's recovery plan, we will invest billions in key projects that will put Canadians to work, cut commute times, and reduce emissions. Justin Trudeau refuse de soutenir des projets importants comme le troisième lien Québec-Lévis. Un gouvernement conservateur va réaliser ce projet. Un vote pour les conservateurs, c'est un vote pour le troisième lien. Avec le plan de rétablissement du Canada, on va investir des milliards de dollars dans des projets clés. Ces projets d'infrastructure vont créer des possibilités d'emploi, réduire les temps de déplacement et réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. We will scrap the failed Canada Infrastructure Bank and unlock the money sitting there to get infrastructure projects built. We'll review the Investing in Canada plan and other infrastructure programs to make sure they work for local priorities, for our municipalities and First Nation communities, and not just for the priorities of Ottawa insiders. Unlike the Liberals, we won't condition funding so narrowly to whether the project can be described as green infrastructure. We will ensure infrastructure funding maximizes our economic recovery. That means targeting funding to projects that strengthen transit and trade, reduce congestion and gridlock, and advance economic reconciliation with First Nations. And as the last 18 months have made abundantly clear, we need to invest in broadband networks, especially for our rural, remote, and northern communities. Contrairement aux libéraux, on ne va pas imposer de conditions au financement. On ne va pas demander que le projet doit être une infrastructure verte. On va s'assurer que le financement des infrastructures maximise notre reprise économique. Par ce faire, on va cibler les projets qui renforcent le transport en commun, qui créent de la richesse, qui réduisent la congestion routière et qui assurent la réconciliation économique avec les Premières Nations. Et comme les 18 derniers mois l'ont montré, on doit investir pour connecter nos communautés rurales et les régions éloignées à Internet haute vitesse. We will ensure every part of this country is connected to high-speed Internet by 2025 to eliminate the digital divide and ensure every Canadian can participate in the digital economy. We will build world-class 5G networks, and we'll make sure companies like Huawei aren't building them. Our modern infrastructure will be built by Canadians for Canadians. By investing in these strategic projects, a Conservative government will create hundreds of thousands of good jobs, kick our economy into turbo drive, improve the everyday lives of Canadians. Only Canada's Conservatives have a detailed plan to secure world-class infrastructure and get our economy back on track. En investissant dans ces projets, un gouvernement conservateur va créer des centaines de milliers de bons emplois, remettre notre économie sur les rails et améliorer le quotidien des Canadiens. Seuls les conservateurs ont un plan pour agir pour des infrastructures modernes et relancer notre économie. It's time to get shovels in the ground. It's time to get to work. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions. We will now be taking questions. Première question.
Bonjour, M. O'Toole, Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada. Ce matin, le Parti libéral a dévoilé sa plateforme qui ne contient pas de plan de retour à l'équilibre budgétaire. Vous promettez un retour à l'équilibre budgétaire en 10 ans, mais vous ne dites pas comment vous comptez y arriver. Vous n'avez toujours pas de plan chiffré. Alors, qu'est-ce que ça vaut, cette promesse que vous faites d'un retour à l'équilibre budgétaire quand vous n'avez pas de plan chiffré? Comment les gens peuvent-ils vous faire confiance? Quand est-ce que vous allez dévoiler ce plan?
Parce qu'on a un plan pour le rétablissement du Canada après la pandémie.
Mais le plan chiffré?
Un plan avec un plan d'équilibrer le budget au cours de la prochaine décennie. Et on a soumis notre plan immédiatement pour le directeur parlementaire du budget. Dans une élection qui, M. Trudeau, a déclenché en pleine d'une pandémie. On a un plan d'équilibrer le budget, un plan de créer des emplois, d'avoir une loi anticorruption, un plan d'action sur la santé mentale canadienne, un plan d'être plus près dans le futur. C'est dans notre plateforme. Et les Canadiens et les Canadiennes méritent un gouvernement qui va agir dans leurs intérêts. Et pour les projets d'infrastructure, on va livrer, pas comme M. Trudeau avec des belles paroles.
J'aimerais vous entendre sur le plan chiffré, une date si vous en avez une. Par ailleurs, M. Trudeau promet de mettre en place un projet de loi qui protégerait les propriétaires d'entreprises qui veulent implanter un passeport vaccinal, les protéger légalement. Est-ce que vous pensez que ça va trop loin, cette proposition?
Les vaccins sont très importants. C'est un outil primordial dans notre lutte contre le COVID-19. J'encourage tous les Canadiens et Québécois de se faire vacciner. Et c'est pourquoi, il y a un an, j'ai demandé un approvisionnement suffisant des vaccins. Et en pleine d'une pandémie, la 4e vague, on doit travailler ensemble. Chaque niveau de gouvernement et les entreprises dans le secteur privé aussi. On doit utiliser les vaccins, les tests de dépistage quotidiens, les masques et la distanciation sociale, tous les outils nécessaires pour lutter contre le COVID-19. Et maintenant, nous sommes dans une élection à cause de M. Trudeau et ses intérêts. Je suis ici pour les intérêts des Canadiens.
Next
Repeat in
question.
English, but specifically actually answering the questions on the proposal.
Mr. Trudeau should be focused on the pandemic, working with all levels of government and the private sector using the tools we have to fight COVID-19. He's not done that. We're in an election, in a crisis, not because of the well-being of Canadians, because the Liberal Party wants a majority. I have a plan to work with all levels of government and to make sure our country is more ready in the future, including our fourth pillar of being more prepared, having faster access to vaccines, rapid tests, and other tools. I'll try and work with everyone to fight COVID-19.
Next question.
Mike Couture from Global National. Mr. O'Toole, the Liberals are very proud to say that they released a fully costed platform today. When are you going to be doing the same?
On the first day of this campaign, I was very proud in this very room to launch Canada's recovery plan, a plan to get our country back to work. We submitted it as soon as we could in an election that Mr. Trudeau called during a pandemic. We see a number of recycled promises and some tweaks to a 2-year budget released today with not a complete plan for our economic recovery as a country. I think Canadians deserve better than that. Mr. Trudeau called the election and just recycled some promises he's already failed to deliver on from the previous election. Canadians are tired of that. We deserve better. We deserve a change. We deserve a government with a plan and one that will deliver. Les Canadiens, les Québécois méritent mieux qu'un gouvernement avec des promesses recyclées dans le plateforme de M. Trudeau. Les Canadiens méritent un plan pour notre avenir, pour les emplois, pour notre économie. Et ça serait mon approche. Un plan d'action et un gouvernement éthique aussi.
So just in my follow-up, if you'd like to answer the first question of when you'll be releasing the costing, I'd appreciate that. But also, a former parliamentary budget officer and top economists are saying that you're making massive assumptions about economic growth in this country in order to get back to a balanced budget without cuts. So my question is, could you please tell us where the cuts will be, or are you saying the budget will balance itself?
Well, first, Mike, we've submitted our platform to the parliamentary budget officer as soon as we could. Mr. Trudeau holds the keys to calling this election. He's doing it for his own narrow interests, not for the national interests. And we will update Canada's recovery plan when the PBO gives us the confirmation back. And we have a goal of growing the economy, 3% growth to get all sectors of the economy back to work and to make sure all Canadians have an economic recovery after COVID-19, not just some, as Mr. Trudeau does. We lost billions of dollars of investment in Canada. We were running massive deficits before COVID-19. So we're going to create jobs and opportunity, build infrastructure that Mr. Trudeau announces but never gets built, and have a detailed plan and a disciplined plan to get spending under control to balance the budget over the course of 10 years. That's our commitment. It's what we're running on, and we will deliver. On a un plan d'équilibrer le budget au cours de la prochaine décennie et on a un objectif de croissance économique de 3% par année. C'est un objectif important parce qu'on doit avoir une relance économique dans chaque secteur de notre économie et dans toutes les régions de notre pays. On a perdu 160 milliards de dollars dans des investissements au Canada avant la pandémie avec M. Trudeau. On a eu des déficits énormes avant la pandémie. C'est pourquoi les Canadiens et les Québécois méritent un plan d'action pour une relance économique et un gouvernement qui va agir sur les projets d'infrastructure et les priorités pour notre pays.
Next question.
Mr. O'Toole, good morning. Omar Sachedina, CTV News. You say that you will require that equipment and materials for infrastructure be bought from Canadian companies or from countries where there's a mutual agreement between both countries. So which countries would an O'Toole government stop buying from?
Well, we have to work to improve our relationship with the United States. We have one of the oldest and most important trade relationships in the world, and our relationship with the United States is at its lowest point in modern history under Mr. Trudeau. Under 3 presidents, we see Buy American, we see increasing tariffs on softwood lumber, we've seen tariffs on steel and aluminum, we've seen Buy American provisions getting worse. I think we need to partner and improve that relationship. We need to work with the United States, particularly with respect to concerns about global trade with China. That will allow us to have a made in North America, a partnership approach to kickstart our economic recovery.
But you say that you'll only be buying from countries where the materials come from Canadian companies, essentially. So are you essentially now saying that you're putting the U.S. and China on notice?
I want to see less made in China, to be honest with you, and more made in Canada. And I have no hesitation saying that because I've been saying it for several years. We can't sit by and watch a country like China gain from global trade while they don't follow the rules. So we need to start working alongside our allies like the Americans, the Australians, and others who've actually been much more serious with respect to China for many years. Mr. Trudeau has been out of step on this issue. I think we have an incredible ability to improve those trade relationships with our close allies and take a much stronger, more principled approach with respect to China.
Next question.
On doit travailler en étroite collaboration avec nos alliés ainsi que concerne la Chine. Le commerce international, particulièrement pour l'acier et l'aluminium, M. Trudeau était toujours dehors de la ligne avec la Chine. Et j'aimerais voir plus de fabriquer au Canada et moins de fabriquer en Chine, parce que nos travailleurs méritent un plan réel pour une relance économique dans les secteurs stratégiques comme l'acier et l'aluminium, l'auto et les autres. Et on a un plan pour ça dans notre plateforme et on doit améliorer nos relations avec les Américains, les Australiens pour le bien-être de notre économie et pour nos valeurs à travers le monde, pour les droits humains. Et ça serait mon approche comme Premier ministre.
Next question.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. Mr. O'Toole, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, he's standing behind Raj Saini, allowing him to run in this election. Saini is facing multiple allegations of inappropriate behavior that he denies. The Liberals say that there's a process in place and that they are taking this seriously. What do you think that Mr. Trudeau should do now and why?
These are very serious allegations and troubling allegations. We need to make sure Parliament Hill is a place where people can come to serve their country, work in politics free from allegations and intimidation and workplace incidents. And this is a pattern with Mr. Trudeau and his office. No accountability and a culture of cover-up. We saw this in the Canadian Armed Forces with multiple allegations that went to the Prime Minister's office, his Chief of Staff, the Clerk of the Privy Council, the Minister of National Defence. Everyone knew except Mr. Trudeau, apparently. Now we see this same culture of cover-up was taking place with their own paid staff members. It's very concerning, and I hope to hear a serious response from the Prime Minister and his team on how this type of cover-up took place.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Tom Parry with CBC. Just want to come back to your economic plan. Have you calculated, once you roll back the one-time spending, the support programs for COVID, have you calculated what kind of a shortfall you're going to be facing in terms of balancing that budget? And if you don't hit your 3% targets, what are you going to target for cuts?
We will hit our 3% target because we're the only party in this race that wants to see an economic recovery for all Canadians, in all sectors of the economy, all regions of the country, and we put forward a plan to get our economy surging in the right direction. And Canadians remember, before the pandemic, Mr. Trudeau was running massive deficits, raising taxes, investment and jobs were leaving Canada, and they were increasing government spending by about 7% per year. We have to have an approach to help people get back on their feet after COVID-19, get the economy working, and then have a disciplined approach to get spending under control to balance the budget over the course of a decade. We're taking a very prudent approach here, and Conservatives have done this before. After the global recession, we kept taxes low, we focused on getting people back to work, and we balanced the budget over a period of 4 to 5 years. We're taking a very responsible approach, and Canada's recovery plan details our path out of COVID-19. And I think Canadians, the more they get to see our plan, they know it's exactly what our country needs. On a un objectif d'une croissance économique de 3% par année. On va atteindre nos objectifs parce qu'on va avoir une relance économique dans chaque secteur de notre économie. Nous sommes le seul parti en faveur d'une relance économique dans toutes les régions. Les familles canadiennes, québécois méritent une relance économique et on doit réduire les dépenses dans une manière équitable au cours d'une décennie. M. Trudeau a eu des déficits énormes avant la pandémie. Il a perdu des investissements historiques de 160 milliards de dollars avant la pandémie. On a un niveau de chômage et une pénurie de main-d'œuvre en même temps. Les Canadiens et les Québécois méritent un plan et un gouvernement qui va agir pour leur bien-être.
John Iveson, National Post. Following on my colleague's question, you talk about a disciplined plan to get spending under control, but from what you're saying, you're relying on revenue growth, not on spending restraint. Is that right?
We're relying on both, John. So as I said, before the pandemic, it's hard sometimes to think back to life before the pandemic, but Mr. Trudeau had already run about $100 billion of debt in good economic times. He'd raised taxes and was raising spending unlimited across the board, not strategic, by about 7% per year. So our plan is a balanced one to get our budget back to balance over the course of the 10 years by controlling spending, but making sure up front that we help the country get back on its feet, both economically and, as I've said, from a mental health and a wellness point of view. We want to see an economic recovery and a wellness recovery in all parts of the country and in all sectors of the economy. And we see Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh against most sectors of the economy. Energy, natural resources, manufacturing. Mr. Trudeau said Ontario needed to move past manufacturing. We think all families deserve an economic recovery after COVID, and Canada's Conservatives will have their back.
The Liberal plan this morning has a fully costed platform. We don't have the benefit of your numbers. You're saying that the Liberal Party was spending its spending increases of 7% a year. What are you going to increase spending by per year in the first 5 years?
As I've said, at the first opportunity we had, we submitted Canada's recovery plan to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Mr. Trudeau, who called an election during a pandemic, during forest fires in British Columbia, during the crisis in Afghanistan, put his own interests first, he has really just recycled some promises that he failed to keep from the 2019 election with respect to health care, for example. From what I've seen so far, their cobbled together plan for an election he called is essentially a collection of things from a budget that took them 2 years to create. Canadians are kind of tired of this fly-by-night, never live up to the promises you make. Justin Trudeau, he hasn't delivered on any of his promises related to the deficit, related to transparency, related to safe drinking water. Canadians deserve a government that will actually deliver.
Next question.
Hello, Mr. O'Toole. Menaka Raman-Wilms, The Globe and Mail. In a video of a Zoom call that surfaced from last year, you called Liberal MP Marion Monsef a fraud and a disgrace. Now that you're running for Prime Minister of the country, do you stand by those comments, or would you like to say anything today to Ms. Monsef in regards to those remarks?
Well, sometimes even I let my frustrations boil over with some of the approach, the scandals of the Trudeau government. But as I've said, I'm trying to run a very positive campaign based on the future of our country. I think our best years are ahead of us, but we need leadership. We need a plan to get there. And even I have to step up my game at some points. But as I've said, in this campaign, we've had a positive approach by releasing our plan early and trying to bring people together. Mr. Trudeau has been caught putting out misleading media, picking fights with premiers, pulling things off government internet, trying to divide people in the midst of a pandemic. That's not what we need at a time when we need to be working together, respecting one another, and getting this country back on its feet.
I'll just ask again, do you want to say anything to Ms. Monsef in regards to those remarks?
I've been very disappointed with the government's constant cover-up approach with respect to misconduct, and particularly sexual misconduct and allegations of such in the military. Now we see those coming out with respect to the Parliamentary Hill environment. I'm sure it troubles the minister whose responsibility it is to ensure that their government has a zero-tolerance culture. That will be our approach. And as I've said, I'm trying to make sure we run a very positive campaign based on Canada's recovery plan. I will hold myself to that regard, and I'll hold my team to that same level.
Next question.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. The Liberal platform pledges to enshrine abortion services as publicly funded and medically necessary in the Canada Health Act. Would you support a change to the Canada Health Act that requires provinces to provide publicly funded abortion services?
As you know, I'm a pro-choice member of Parliament and leader of the Conservative Party, and I will always defend the right of women to make health decisions for themselves and always defend the right of access in all parts of the country. I've said that on many occasions during this campaign. I will say it every day to make sure that people can hear loud and clear that the Conservatives are here to stand up for your rights and to make sure we get the country back on its feet with our recovery plan.
The Conservative-leaning premiers of Alberta and Ontario have barely been seen in public or spoken with media in the past 3+ weeks. I'm wondering if you'd welcome Jason Kenney and Doug Ford coming out and showing a little solidarity for your campaign, or are you satisfied that they kind of maintain a minimal public profile until the campaign wraps up here?
As you know, I'm running on Canada's recovery plan. Our team has put a lot of thought and a lot of time reaching out to Canadians, employers, nonprofit organizations, to put forward a plan to get Canada back on its feet. I'm putting that in contrast to Mr. Trudeau, who constantly says nice things and never delivers on literally every economic issue, right through to reconciliation, right through to how he promised to have a government that was transparent by default. And we see a government that is cover-up by default. I'm asking Canadians to take a look at the Conservative Party. We have a new leader, we have a new approach, and we have a plan to get our country back on its feet. And I'll work with anyone of any stripe at any level of government, First Nation leaders, municipal leaders, to fight COVID-19 and to provide opportunity for people in this country, and that will be my style as Prime Minister.
Next question.
Greg Quinn, Market News International. Sir, you did reference what happened to the economy after 2008. The Conservatives moved towards a budget balance. Many global economists thought that governments pulled that stimulus too early, and it led to a recovery that was prolonged and frustrated a jobs recovery. What will you do to ensure that you're not pulling the carpet out from this recovery too soon?
Great question. This is a jobs recovery. We will kickstart an economic recovery based on jobs, based on our job surge, based on helping the highly affected sectors that Mr. Trudeau has ignored, not even met with in some cases. Some sectors are literally holding on by a thread, and other parts of the economy we've seen record profits, and Mr. Trudeau keep those programs in place. We need to target support, target getting people back to work. Our job surge will target people who've been out of work for 10 months or more. We're going to make support changes for EI for people with sicknesses. We're going to support the gig economy and workers there to give them more protection. We're going to fight for Canadian workers and make sure that our economic recovery is a worker-led recovery.
Secondly, on China, the platform has dozens of references to China and getting tough on China, but it's clearly one of the world's dominant economies and diplomatic powers. I wonder how your kind of approach fits with Canada's image of the world of being kind of a nice guy, and if you're really the kind of person that could take on China single-handedly.
Canada is a nice person, and I think we're very proud to not be a belligerent country, but we've always been there for our allies and for our values, from Vimy Ridge to Kandahar. And I've been saying it's been sad to see Mr. Trudeau not there with the situation in Afghanistan. But our allies are actually waiting for a serious Canada to get back on the world stage. Our allies, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States, have already made a decision with respect to Huawei in their 5G. Many of our allies, including the United States, have called out the genocide in Xinjiang towards the Uyghur minority population. Mr. Trudeau didn't even show up for the vote. So the world is waiting for that nice Canada to be there on the world stage to stand up for our values, our interests, and our security.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Mr. O'Toole, Janet Silver, iPolitics. You talked a little bit earlier about investing in projects like internet access and providing 5G across the country. We've spoken to some internet providers, and they say that part of the problem is that when governments give the smaller internet providers funds, they sit on the money, they don't invest in the infrastructure, and a few years later they'll sell to the bigger internet providers. So who does the O'Toole government give the money to, and how do you balance that?
That's a great question. Well, we want to tackle spectrum squatting, where people will not actually roll out when they have some of the auctioned spectrum. We need to make sure that is used, and we're going to have policies to do that. Mr. Trudeau has 6 agencies within the federal government all working towards expanding high-speed internet connectivity. There is no focus there. So we're going to have a Minister of Rural Affairs that will shepherd our aggressive and ambitious goal to have high-speed internet connectivity by 2025, 5 years faster than the lackadaisical, unstrategic approach of Mr. Trudeau. And we will partner with the private sector, with municipal utilities in some cases, and with the provinces to kickstart an end to the digital divide.
Mr. O'Toole, you talked a little bit earlier about stepping up your game and how you would hold your team to that same level, but that doesn't seem to be the case with particular candidates, especially Cheryl Gallant. Why not?
I've said every candidate in this race is running on Canada's recovery plan, which is actually a positive plan to get Canada back on its feet, because we believe that Canada can get back on its feet and tackle issues in our country that are important, including climate change. And every single member of our caucus will be relentlessly focused on that, no exceptions.
It will be all for today. Ce sera tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christy Mathis, and I'm the Director of Media Relations for the province, and I'll be your moderator for today's press briefing. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the Honourable Michelle Thompson, who's our Minister of Health and Wellness, who's going to kick us off with a few words this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm humbled that the Premier has trusted me, and I'm very excited to get started in my role. I've had personal healthcare experience for 30 years, both as a registered nurse and most recently as a long-term care administrator. I can tell you that our healthcare workers in this province are second to none, but our system is broken. Change is hard, but it is absolutely needed. The Premier has made our vision for healthcare very clear, and I'm pleased today to be here as he shares some first steps. Thank you. Go ahead, Premier.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to speak directly to those who have been working tirelessly these past months to protect Nova Scotians from COVID-19, including nurses, doctors, administrators, continuing care assistants, working long-term care facilities, and otherwise staff at the Health Authority and the Department of Health and Wellness.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde. When I look at the bold and concrete ideas in our platform, I couldn't be more proud to be part of this Liberal team. Because now is the time to finish the fight against COVID-19 and build an even stronger Canada. When the pandemic hit, Canadians stepped up. And your Liberal government worked hard to deliver results for Canadians. We climbed 3 mountains. In the first mountain, we procured 2.7 billion items of PPE for Canadians, from gloves and gowns to N95s and surgical masks. In the second mountain, we procured 44 million rapid tests for Canadians. And in the third mountain, we secured the most diverse portfolio of vaccines in the world, leading the G7 and the G20 in vaccine administration and making sure we have enough vaccines for all eligible Canadians while contributing to the developing world. And while we were securing these deals, the Conservative Party told Canadians that we wouldn't have vaccines until 2030. Le gouvernement libéral a appuyé les provinces et territoires et s'est assuré que nous avions suffisamment de vaccins pour réaliser la plus grande campagne de vaccination de l'histoire du Canada. Let me make one thing clear. The big, bold vision that we have for our country is only possible if we finish the fight against COVID-19. While some may want to bring more privatization to our healthcare system and don't think that people traveling on planes and trains need to be vaccinated, we have a plan to help more Canadians find a family doctor, cut wait times, and improve the quality of long-term care in this country. That's job number 1. Keeping Canadians safe is job number 1. Nous devons avancer ensemble. Let's move forward together.
COVID-19 has further revealed the fundamental gaps that Indigenous communities face in Canada, and recent events have shone a light on the tragic legacy of colonialism. We must work to address these difficult truths and move forward on the path of reconciliation together. We're committed to walking that shared path, to confront the painful legacy of residential schools, to end long-term drinking water advisories, and tackle systemic racism across the country. We all have a role to play in building a better and fairer country, and the Liberal Party will be there to support that.
For too long, owning a home has seemed out of reach for too many Canadians. We have to change that. That's why we're going to tax the biggest banks to help more Canadians become homeowners. We'll help first-time homebuyers save up to $30,000. We'll help 1.4 million families move into a new home. And we'll ban foreign investors from snatching up homes that young Canadians could be living in. We have a real plan with real solutions.
Si vous n'avez pas de plan pour l'environnement, ça veut dire que vous n'avez pas de plan pour l'avenir de notre économie. Dans cette élection, en tant que Canadien, on doit choisir, soit de revenir en arrière à l'ère de Stephen Harper, ou d'aller de l'avant avec un plan ambitieux en matière de lutte au changement climatique, pour créer de bons emplois, des emplois verts dans nos communautés, pour que nos enfants et nos petits-enfants vivent dans un environnement sain, avec de l'air et de l'eau propre. Choisissons d'avancer ensemble.
We know that we can't build a better future without supporting young Canadians. That's why we've been creating new jobs and career opportunities for youth since 2015. But we need to do more and move forward to give them a better start. That's why we'll eliminate interest on student loans, offer more support for repaying those loans, and invest in mental health support for students at colleges and universities across Canada. Young Canadians are the leaders of today, and we have to be there to help them succeed.
Les armes à feu n'ont pas de place dans nos rues. Il en va de la sécurité de tout le monde. On a déjà banni les armes d'assaut. On veut encore aller plus loin en offrant $1 milliard aux provinces et territoires qui sont prêtes à bannir les armes de poing. Mais Erin O'Toole, il cancellerait tout ça. Il travaille main dans la main avec le lobby des armes à feu. Les conservateurs veulent ramener en arrière. Nous, on veut renforcer le contrôle des armes à feu.
Salut, ici Mouna Fortier, la candidate libérale d'Ottawa-Vanier et la coprésidente de la plateforme libérale. Lorsque nous avons commencé à élaborer le programme du Parti libéral du Canada, nous avions une chose en tête, vous. Notre objectif avec cette plateforme et chaque plateforme ou budget que nous avons présenté aux Canadiens depuis 2015, c'est d'aider les Canadiens, rendre la vie plus abordable pour vous et votre famille, lutter contre les changements climatiques, créer des emplois et faire croître la classe moyenne. Et depuis 2015, nous avons fait énormément de progrès. Notre plan a mis plus d'argent dans les poches de 9 parents sur 10 grâce à la prestation canadienne pour enfants et a permis de sortir 400 000 enfants de la pauvreté. Il n'est plus possible de polluer librement au Canada et nous avons réduit les impôts de la classe moyenne et augmenté ceux du 1% des plus riches. Mais il nous reste encore beaucoup à faire pour aider les Canadiens à relever les défis auxquels nous devons faire face. Nous ne pouvons pas laisser le Canada reculer. Nous avons fait trop de chemin pour nous arrêter maintenant. On doit continuer d'avancer ensemble.
I'm Terry Duguid, Liberal candidate for Winnipeg South and the Liberal Platform co-chair with Mona. Our platform stays true to those core values, but it also tackles the challenges Canadians face today. Our plan starts with finishing the fight against COVID-19 and getting the job done on vaccines so that all Canadians can stay safe and healthy. It also means having a real plan to build a better Canada for everyone. And that's why we're making $10 a day childcare a reality everywhere, why we're going to create green new jobs and create a cleaner future, and why we're helping more Canadians have a home of their own. Our plan will move Canada forward, it will build a better country for everyone, and will guide us as we stay focused on what matters most, you. Now I'm happy to introduce our candidate for University Rosedale, Chrystia Freeland.
Merci tout le monde. C'est un très grand plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. Je tiens à reconnaître que nous sommes sur le territoire traditionnel des peuples Mississauga du Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee et Wendat. Les Canadiens nous ont élus en 2015 avec un mandat clair: soutenir la classe moyenne et rendre la vie plus abordable pour tout le monde. Et c'est ce que nous avons fait. Nous avons sorti 435 000 enfants de la pauvreté. Nous avons baissé l'âge de la retraite de 67 à 65 ans et nous avons augmenté les impôts des personnes les plus riches. And then, when we were re-elected in 2019, no one knew that Canada was about to face our toughest test since the Second World War. But when the global pandemic reached our shores, we stayed true to our core conviction, just as we did during the NAFTA negotiations with Donald Trump, that Canada is best, that Canada is strongest when we work together, when we're there for each other. We knew that the only way forward was to provide unprecedented support for Canadians and Canadian businesses. Canadian workers and Canadian families got through these difficult months with help from the CIRB, the CRB, and an expanded EI safety net. Canadian businesses staved off bankruptcy, thanks to their own resilience, of course, but also thanks to the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and CEBA loans. Toutefois, nous sommes conscientes que la lutte contre la COVID n'est pas encore terminée. Les secteurs les plus durement touchés, comme le tourisme, l'hôtellerie, les arts et la culture, ne peuvent toujours pas réouvrir complètement. C'est pourquoi nous leur apportons encore plus de soutien ciblé pour les aider à passer à travers les prochains mois. Et nous comprenons que c'est un grand défi réouvrir une entreprise après plus d'1 an de confinement et d'interruption. Et c'est pourquoi nous offrons un soutien additionnel aux entreprises par l'entremise du programme d'embauche pour les inciter à embaucher. Et nous avons élargi l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs pour sortir plus de travailleurs de la pauvreté. We're providing this support because it's the compassionate thing to do, of course. But you know what? It is also economically the smart thing to do. Our government's bold action during the pandemic helped prevent what economists call economic scarring. And that has preserved our country's economic muscle and will help us all to come roaring back. Aujourd'hui, il est notre devoir d'apprendre les leçons de la pandémie et de bâtir une économie canadienne plus résiliente. C'est pourquoi un de nos engagements fondamentaux est de créer un système d'apprentissage et de garde d'enfants abordable, accessible et de haute qualité. For more than 50 years, for more than half a century, Canadian women have been fighting for early learning and childcare as an essential feminist policy. The COVID recession has shown once and for all that it is also an essential economic policy. Without childcare, parents, and let's be honest, mothers, can't work. The closing of our schools and daycares during the COVID lockdowns drove women's participation in the labor force down to its lowest level in more than 2 decades. That's why we are investing $30 billion to build a Canada-wide, high-quality, affordable, and accessible early learning and childcare system. And let me tell you something. This is not just a paper promise. We have already rolled up our sleeves, we have already gotten to work, and we are getting the job done. To date, we have signed childcare agreements with 8 provinces and territories. Thanks to these deals alone, nearly half of Canadian children will have access to high-quality care for just $10 a day within 5 years or less. These deals will be great for Canadian children. They will be great for Canadian women. And they will turbocharge the Canadian economy. Et c'est un fait économique. Regardez le Québec. Les services de garde ont augmenté son PIB provincial d'1,7%. A publicly funded, Canada-wide early learning and childcare system will deliver that same robust growth for all Canadians. But Erin O'Toole's Conservatives have said emphatically that they will rip up these historic agreements, just like Stephen Harper did. That would be a step backwards for Canadian children, a step backwards for Canadian women, and a step backwards for the Canadian economy. We cannot let that happen. Unlike the Conservatives, our party has a real plan for the future, a plan that creates jobs and growth for everyone. Et alors, je suis vraiment heureuse d'accueillir maintenant notre chef, Justin Trudeau, qui présentera notre plan pour continuer de faire avancer le Canada.
Merci, Christian. Bonjour tout le monde. It's great to be back in Toronto and joined virtually by our extraordinary team members from right across the country. And thank you, Christia. As Deputy Prime Minister, you've been relentless in standing up for families, workers, and for all Canadians. As Finance Minister and the first woman to hold the post, you've met a historic moment with a historic plan on everything from childcare to middle-class jobs. On a passé beaucoup d'heures tous les deux au téléphone avec les premiers ministres des provinces et territoires pour se mobiliser contre la COVID-19. Alors je suis très enthousiaste quand je pense à tout ce qu'on peut continuer d'accomplir ensemble. Merci mon ami. In the last 18 months, our country has faced the crisis of a century. It's been tough, tougher than anyone could have expected. But we've faced it together. Dès le premier jour, on vous a dit qu'on allait être là pour vous. Et c'est exactement ce qu'on a fait. La PCU vous a aidé à nourrir votre famille. La subvention salariale vous a permis de garder vos employés. Les prêts pour les petites entreprises vous ont aidé à traverser la tempête et ça a donné des résultats. Le Canada a réussi à surmonter cette épreuve mieux que presque tous les autres pays du monde. On a réussi à faire ça ensemble. Et pendant qu'on lutte pour en finir avec la pandémie une bonne fois pour toutes, il est temps de choisir la suite pour notre pays. In this election, you have a choice about what the next 18 months and the next 18 years look like. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Because we have a plan to move forward for everyone. On health, on housing, on childcare, on climate. So here's what our plan looks like. Keeping you safe and healthy is job one. It has always been and always will be. That's why we'll make sure you can find a family doctor or a family health team. And while we're at it, we'll make a historic, dedicated investment in mental health care, too. Because mental health is health. And it's time it was treated that way. Et tout ça, c'est seulement une partie de ce qu'on va faire en santé. Mais on va aussi en faire plus en matière de logement. Parce qu'il y a trop de gens qui se demandent s'ils pourront un jour se permettre d'acheter une maison ou simplement s'ils pourront se trouver un chez-soi. On va vous aider à devenir propriétaire plus tôt. D'abord, on va vous aider à épargner pour une mise de fonds plus rapidement. On va aussi s'attaquer aux requins de l'immobilier, combattre la surenchère et mettre un frein aux fortunes étrangères qui viennent acheter des maisons ici sans les habiter. And once you have a home and you've settled in, well, maybe you want to start a family. Well, we've got your back there, too. We'll keep fighting for $10 a day childcare. That means defending the 8 deals we've already signed while working with provinces and territories that still need to come on board. Et on pense aussi à l'avenir de nos enfants et nos petits-enfants. Mes amis, on a un plan ambitieux pour réduire la pollution et créer plus d'emplois. On va investir dans les industries propres et rendre notre réseau électrique carboneutre d'ici 2035. Et pendant qu'on fait tout ça, on va rester fidèle à nos valeurs. On va défendre la diversité. On va avancer sur la voie commune de la réconciliation et on va bâtir un meilleur Canada pour tous. That's our plan to move forward. And of course, it all starts with finishing the fight against COVID-19 for good. Over the last little while, you've probably seen the disturbing anger of anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers. You might have seen them marching downtown against local businesses that are following public health rules, or yelling at a grocery store clerk or a server at your local diner, or even threatening people at one of our rallies. Vous avez probablement aussi vu le manque de clarté franchement inquiétant de certains chefs politiques. Et oui, je parle d'Erin O'Toole et Yves-François Blanchette, qui semblent vouloir justifier les anti-vaccins parce qu'après tout, c'est leur choix. Let's be clear. It's your freedom I'm focused on. The freedom of the responsible majority of us who are fully vaccinated. The freedom of our children under 12 who can't yet get their shots. Because that's what's at stake. And I will always stand up for your right to be safe, to be in places that are free from COVID-19, your right to not be forced back into lockdown. So we'll stand firm on our commitment that federal public servants should be vaccinated. We'll make sure everyone on your plane or train is vaccinated. We'll protect businesses that mandate vaccinations from unjustified lawsuits, and we'll pay for the rollout of proof of vaccination programs for every province and territory that steps up. Depuis les 18 derniers mois, la grande majorité des Canadiens ont fait les bons choix. Vous avez porté un masque. Vous vous êtes aidés les uns les autres parce que vous saviez que c'était la chose à faire. Chacun, à votre manière, vous avez été des héros. Et maintenant, je vous comprends quand vous dites que vous voulez qu'on en finisse avec la pandémie. Et c'est exactement ce qu'on va faire. Pour vous, pour votre famille, et pour les enfants comme Betty, qui a 9 ans. I met Betty a few weeks ago in Regina. She's 9 years old and had written to me last year asking to make sure her grandparents got vaccinated. You know what? They did. And so did millions of other people. And now Canada is leading the world. So if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, make sure you don't get left behind. Do it for Betty and kids like her. And do it because that's how we'll beat this pandemic for good. That's how we'll get to a brighter future for everyone. Because, my friends, that's what's waiting for us just around the bend. And I know you see that. In the last 2.5 weeks, I've been traveling across the country. From Markham to Longueuil, from Victoria to Halifax, in the north, out west, and across the prairies. And everywhere I've gone, no matter who I've talked to, there's something I've always found. Hope. Hope in our future. Hope in each other. And the unshakable hope that together we can build a better Canada for everyone. Together, we've come so far. Together, we can go so much further. Mes amis, chaque décision compte. Ça compte pour les parents et les enfants à l'école de savoir qu'on se tient debout pour défendre la vaccination. Ça compte pour les patients qui cherchent un médecin ou qui attendent une chirurgie, qu'on va se battre pour garder un système de santé public et universel. Ça compte pour les générations futures de réduire la pollution et atteindre la carboneutralité. Ces décisions-là comptent vraiment. Et pour être bien franc, quand Erin O'Toole n'est même pas capable de dire à ses candidats de se faire vacciner, on voit bien qu'il ne comprend pas ce que ça veut dire d'avoir du leadership. What Erin O'Toole is doing is not leadership. Courting special interests, from anti-vaxxers to climate deniers, from the gun lobby to anti-choice organizations, failing to mention racism even once in his platform, and ripping up $10 a day child care agreements across the country, none of that is leadership. And that's why this election matters. That's why having a real, positive plan and being ready to actually deliver on it matters. So let's talk about that instead. Parlons d'à quel point c'est important d'avoir des places en garderie à 10 $ ou moins pour nos enfants, mais aussi pour s'assurer que les parents, et en particulier les mères, puissent réussir. D'ailleurs, on sait que ce qui est bon pour les familles, c'est aussi bon pour l'économie. Parlons de ce que ça représente de pouvoir s'acheter une première maison. Parlons d'en finir avec l'itinérance et de s'assurer que tout le monde ait un chez-soi pour transformer des vies et des communautés. And let's talk about what real action on climate change means. Clean air for today and tomorrow. Good jobs for years to come. Canada succeeding in a world where competition is increasingly green. I want to speak for a moment to all the young people voting for the first time in this election. You've reminded me that you don't even really remember what the Stephen Harper era was like. Instead, you see all that we've done in the past years on climate, just like on reconciliation, on fighting systemic racism and discrimination, as just the baseline. And there's no doubt that we've made real important change. But I hear you when you say that we need to move even faster. I hear you, and I agree. Yes, we're in a crisis, and no, half measures won't do. And going backward, that isn't even an option. Because you want ambition, you deserve ambition, just like Betty deserves a bold plan for her future. And that's exactly what we're ready to deliver. Let me tell you something else about Betty. She told me that she wants, one day, to be Prime Minister. Since she's in elementary school, it'll be a few years still. And that means we have a few years to get this right by the time she's ready to lead on the challenges of the future. So let's finish this hard work now. Fight climate change. Stand up to systemic racism. Walk the path of reconciliation. And to do all that and more, end this pandemic once and for all. My friends, these are not small goals. But during this pandemic, we've learned all that Canadians can do when up against a challenge. We've been an example to the world. Chaque fois que vous faisiez face à un obstacle, et il y en a eu beaucoup dans les derniers mois, vous avez tenu le coup. Vous avez gardé espoir. C'est toute cette résilience et cette bienveillance qu'on a mis dans notre plan ambitieux pour l'avenir. Et ce plan, il faut le mettre en marche. Pas dans 1 an, pas dans 2 ans. Il faut le mettre en marche dès maintenant. Et pour y arriver, ça prend une équipe qui rassemble tout ce qu'il y a de meilleur à travers le pays. Our Liberal team has done so much over the past 6 years. Just think of what we can accomplish if we have even more extraordinary Canadians joining in. So make your voice heard. Maybe that means reaching out to your great local Liberal candidate to tell them you stand with them. Maybe that means you go knock doors or make phone calls. But above all, make sure to vote. Make sure to choose the future you want. Together, we can measure up to the belief you have in this country, in each other. My friends, I'm ready if you are. I'm ready for the hard work. I'm ready for hope. I'm ready to move forward for everyone. Merci.
So we hope that today's broadcast does help you and inspire you to vote, help you know what it is that you're looking for out of elected officials so that you make the right decision and the right choice for your community. You've been listening to Depictions Media with Policy and Rights and your host, Michael Clocks. Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.